Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, we'll hear how opposition to Common Core education standards is causing problems for a bill that would change Arizona's high school graduation tests. And it's time again for our monthly look at the latest science news with world-renowned physicist Lawrence Krauss. That's next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Representative John Kavanaugh is scrapping his idea to make it a crime for transgendered people to use the restroom of their choice. Kavanaugh says the bill is an unnecessary reach of government. So instead, Kavanaugh says he'll soon introduce a bill that protects businesses from lawsuits and criminal penalties if they deny transgendered people from using a restroom. Legislature is considering a bill that focuses on expanding Common Core education standards in Arizona. Opponents of Common Core say the changes will remove local control over Arizona school curriculum. I'll speak with an opponent of the bill and Common Core, but first, here in favor of the bill is Representative Heather Carter. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Very quickly, let's define terms. What is Common Core?
Common Core, and thank you for having me on today. Common Core is a grassroots effort that Arizona has been involved in for about 3, almost even 5 years now, to set standards that are more rigorous than the standards that we have now, to make sure that our students are career and college ready moving forward.
And this would replace the Ames test? I know that there's a PARCC test, correct? A kind of corresponding test that goes with it. And that means Ames goes away?
Well, then let's dive into what the difference is between the Arizona Common Core standards and the PARCC test. So let's talk about the standards first, because we have to do that. We have to know what our students are learning in schools. So we have state standards that set clearly defined benchmarks of what students need to learn at each grade. And for example, the Ames test, which is a measure of our current standards, is a 10th grade test. And students continue attending high school all the way through 12th grade. So the standards will be articulated all the way through 12th grade and tested all the way through 12th grade. That's a big change.
So the new test will be more university or secondary education more ready for that sort of thing?
Well, what the new standards do, and then the corresponding tests that Arizona decides to use to test those standards,
yes,
will actually implement exams all the way from kindergarten up through 12th grade. And they're looking at skills that our students need to have to make sure that they are either college or career ready. Many of our students leave high school and go directly into the workforce.
Let's talk about some of the concerns regarding this transition. First of all, again, this has been happening for a while, hasn't it?
For many years.
For like, what, 3, maybe 5, something along those lines?
The conversations have been occurring for about the last 5 years, but for the last 3 years, many of our school districts have already been moving to transition from standards that are really focused on what we would call rote memorization of facts and figures into really more applied, relevant standards.
One of the major concerns is that Arizona would lose local control over school curriculum with this change. Respond, please.
That is just absolutely incorrect. Arizona is steep in the rich tradition of retaining local control. We have locally elected school boards, and what those school boards have the opportunity to do is to use the state standards then to devise a locally created curriculum to meet those standards. And then all the way down to the classroom, the teacher gets to decide how that curriculum then is taught in the classroom. And that's what really a lot of the confusion is. People are misusing the term standards, curriculum, and then they're taking it all the way down to the teacher instruction. That is not what the Common Core does.
So for those who say that proof that it would take away local control is that the curriculum has to be tailored to what they see as a national standard, you say,
if you consider a national standard that, for example, I brought one of them, the old standard is demonstrating fluency of multiplication and division, and the new standard would be fluently multiply and divide within 100 using strategies such as the relationships between multiplication and division. I think multiplying and dividing is something that we could all agree on as an important standard.
Another concern is that there's been little or no public input on this particular change. Response?
I would disagree, because as a teacher, I can tell you we've been talking about the Common Core for some time now. School districts have been having public meetings related to the Common Core. There have been ample opportunities for people to voice their concern. And I too find it strange that now, at sort of the 11th hour, we're finding out that a lot of people have great concern with it.
And there's also concern that it's a consortium of states that will wind up being a national kind of a program that, again, takes away autonomy from Arizona because of this consortium of states outside of Arizona's control with, again, the idea that the curriculum is developed, or at least, I guess developed is the best word for that, elsewhere and then implemented in Arizona.
Arizona educators, both at the K-12 level and at the higher education level, have been involved with creating these standards, and they've been tailored to meet the Arizona educational needs. I mean, this is part of our conservative governor's education reform agenda. We have a variety of business leaders who have come down to the Capitol and expressed great support for the Arizona Common Core and the corresponding test, which Arizona is part of the PARC consortium.
Last question. There's also concern that things like American history will either be watered down or changed to fit some sort of UN-type agenda here. Valid?
I am so glad you brought that up, because if you read the Common Core standards, they are English and math. There is nothing related to history in the standards.
Okay. So is the likelihood of legislation blocking this, is that possible?
In terms of legislation moving forward,
yes,
there's a variety of different forms that legislation can move forward. They can move forward in single bills. They can move forward as amendments on other bills. They can move forward in budget bills.
I lied. Last question is this. Are you surprised by the opposition?
Yes, I am absolutely surprised by the opposition, because I have heard none of this over the last few years. We have been talking about the Arizona Common Core standards.
Well, we thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And joining us now to speak against Arizona adopting the Common Core Education Program is Laddie Shane, Education Policy Advisor for the Maricopa County Republican Party. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ted.
How do you see Common Core?
I see Common Core as, well, the definition of Common Core, if you look at Achieve Inc. and other groups that have supported the Common Core and develop it, it is K through 12 content standards for English and mathematics. I see it as exactly that, but what I also see it as is it's designed as a federal program. It is supported by the federal government. It is part of federal grant money to be implemented into states. So, you know, I hear a lot of it, it's a state-led effort. It was developed by the states. That may be, you know, anything can be led by states if you bring people from other states. I mean, you can title it that. But what I think really what is Common Core, it is a way for our federal government to be impugning on states their 10th Amendment to decide what the education system is in their state.
It sounds like Arizona, though, is at the forefront of developing these Common Core standings and leading this consortium of states. If Arizona chooses to go that direction, is that wrong?
I think that there is a problem with going into this direction, because if we have the tools to do it, why don't we do it ourselves? Why do we need the federal government putting together a system for us? If we have the tools, why shouldn't we develop it? I've spoken to many teachers. I'm an education major at ASU. My aunt's a teacher. My uncle is a teacher. I have brothers and sisters that are still in school. I've spoken to many teachers that are on both sides of the political spectrum, and they will tell you that they like the idea of Common Core, but they have a problem with the implementation. I hear that there were people in Arizona that developed it. Well, then why didn't we develop it? Why have we taken so long? And if we did develop it, why are we still waiting for the assessment to be written? Because the assessment is not written yet to test the students on the Common Core standards.
Not to belabor the point too much, but
Sure.
again, if Arizona does decide that it's going to help develop this, and yes, we want to make sure that it kind of coincides with what other states are looking at, and make sure that we're not far afield, or maybe they've got a good idea that we can implement as well. What's wrong with that?
I think that we can do that, but I think it should be more competitive. I think if we're saying that these are the standards for all the states, then we're going to flatline it. I think that we need where each state is developing their own standards, where it's more competitive. A competitive market's going to produce a better product, and I think that's what we need in our state. We have, and then I hear that we need to know where we are nationally. There's a reason why colleges require ACT and SAT. There's a reason the Stanford 9 is in all the states. There's a reason that there are tests out there to rank us nationally. I mean, I have data right here that I can show you where we are ranked nationally on our reading proficiency. So there are ways to test that.
The idea that this is some sort of a federal, national, governmental control of the state's education system, do you buy that?
I believe it is that. I do believe that. And the reason I believe that is because the federal government said that if you wanted education money, like the Race to the Top grant is brought up a lot, if you want the funding, then you need to put in your application that you are going to accept Common Core. In January 2010, you can see it in the minutes of the State Board of Education. They said that they had to do that to do that. So yes, I believe the federal government is coming in and saying if you want the money, you got to accept this program.
Why do you think the federal government's doing that?
I think the federal government wants to impugn on states and put their thumb on it and look over our education system and decide what our states are teaching.
Why? My question to you, because I'm
Sure.
trying to figure this out
No
from
problem.
your
Yeah,
angle,
absolutely.
is why again would the federal government want to do that? Why?
Because they want control. What they want to do is they want to be able to control what is going on at the state level in the schools. They want to control the curriculum.
But this is something that a consortium of states has come up. Now, granted, there was it could be, from your viewpoint, some prodding from the federal government, maybe a big old carrot
Sure.
sitting out there. But the states, again, are deciding this, and many supporters
Sure.
say that states will have control over the curriculum.
From what I understand, and from what Superintendent Hoopenthal has said in many town halls lately, is you cannot add or delete to this. You cannot delete or take out the standards. You can add 15% to the standards of what we choose as a state. And my question is, if all these states came together, why are there 14 states right now fighting against this, and 9 of them have legislation in their legislature to not do the Common Core?
And I guess the other side would say, why are there so many others that are on the other side of the issue? But my last question to you is, regardless of whether you see this as a federal, as even some more nefarious plan at work here, and we've heard that this could be a UN plot. I'm not going to ask you about that. Is this a better way to educate Arizona children?
I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because I believe that it all comes down to what's going on in that classroom. I believe that we have amazing teachers here in this state. I believe we have amazing universities, and I believe they can come together and decide the standard. I don't think that we need the federal government to. I mean, you look at history. I'm a history education major. When you ask people, we were #1 in education, it was before we had the U.S. Department of Education. I don't think we need the federal government to. I think Arizona has these ways to make ourselves better than everybody else. I think we have the tools to do that.
Okay, we got to stop you right there.
Sure,
Thank
no
you so
problem.
much for joining us. We
Hey,
appreciate
thank you,
it.
Ted.
Once a month, world-renowned ASU physicist Lawrence Krauss makes a visit to the Arizona Horizon studios to discuss the latest in science news. And joining me now is, oddly enough, Professor Lawrence Krauss. Good to see you again.
It's good to be back, as
Wow,
always.
there's just so much to talk about.
And the easy stuff now. Forget that other stuff.
Yeah.
Now we're going to do the
All
easy
right. The Higgs boson, and now confirmed. We now know that this molasses thing is what?
Yeah, we've talked about it a bunch of times, and what's really exciting is a few weeks ago, the experiments basically said that they have confirmed that this is not only walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, but looks like a duck. And it has all the properties of this remarkable particle, which tells us in some sense that our ideas of the origins of mass are really true. So they've really, and I have to say, they were very, very conservative about this. You know, they waited first until the probability was better than 1 in a million that it was not wrong in a sense, and that's continued on and on. But there was clearly a particle that was discovered. But the question was it the particle we're looking for? Because that's the really important thing.
And this was the thing that when smaller stuff passes through it, it's like molasses, and thus you get mass.
Well, exactly, and that's why it has certain properties. Because if this idea is really true, and it's remarkable that it's true, is that the particles that make you and I up have mass by accident. There's this background field, and most of the particles, and in fact, if it wasn't there, all the particles would be massless. Some particles interact more strongly with that field and get slowed down more and act heavier, and some particles interact more weakly with the field. And that tells us the properties of the particle, because the field is associated with the particle. So this particle, the Higgs particle, should interact with some particles more strongly and other particles more weakly, and that's the kind of thing they could measure the Large Hadron Collider.
You mentioned by accident. You mentioned by accident. We'll talk about the collider in a second. You mentioned so where does the Higgs come from?
Well, that's the good question. That's the really good question, and the answer is we don't know yet. We know it's there. We know it's part of the standard model of particle physics. In fact, it was a crazy idea that was invented that I think I've said before. I thought was so slippery that I didn't think it was real, that nature would really have this background field that would, and it really says as the universe cooled down, it cooled in one state rather than another state. If it cooled in the other state, we wouldn't be here. So it really is an accident. But the question is, why does it have the properties it has? Why did that field form? And those are the questions we really want to answer at the Large Hadron Collider. And it's now turned off for 2 years while it's being upgraded. And in fact, if we just measure the Higgs and nothing else, it'll be sort of the best of all worlds and the worst of all worlds, because it really won't answer the really fundamental questions of why.
Is there another boson out there, or a different Higgs out there, that you guys at least suspect is hovering around?
We've got a lot of ideas. We've had 40 years of sensory deprivation while we've been waiting for this, and we've been hallucinating like you do. And so there are a lot of ideas, and one of them suggests a new symmetry of nature called supersymmetry, which might explain why the Higgs has the properties it has, but it would predict 2 Higgs, plus a whole bunch of new particles, some of which could be the dark matter, which we've also talked about, that populate the universe. We need to see those things when the Large Hadron Collider turns back on. If we don't, it tells us that those ideas aren't right, perhaps, but it doesn't tell us what the right track is. And as I say, it'll be really a shame if it doesn't discover something beyond the Higgs, in spite of the fact that it's an incredible triumph to be able to have discovered the origin of mass in the universe.
And you're talking about two separate Higgs. You're not doing quantum on me here, are you?
No, 2 really separate particles.
Okay.
2 particles of different mass
Right.
and prescribed properties, and a whole bunch of new particles. You might say, well, we haven't seen any of them. But if you're an optimist, you can say we've seen half the particles in nature. We just haven't seen the other half.
Okay.
Half full versus half empty.
All right. Well, I got you. All right. So that's this. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's almost as like people are just poo-pooing this a little bit.
Well, I think that it got such hype on July 4th last year that people are saying, okay, enough already with the Higgs. It's kind of, but the physicists it really is a big deal. And I think that the important thing is they're being very, very cautious and careful before they proclaim this particle, because we have been waiting for it for half a century, and it'd be pretty embarrassing if we discovered a particle called the Higgs and it was something else.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see where take it from here. Huh?
And we got a few years to wait. So if you're going to Switzerland, it's a good time to go see the Large Hadron Collider, because the experiment is down, so you can go underground and see all the stuff.
In for repairs for a couple of years. Huh?
Yeah.
All right. Curiosity on Mars discovers nutrients?
Yeah, then it's really neat. Of course, we really want to know if there's life on Mars, or ever was, and that's what we're getting closer and closer. And so we talked before about the fact that Curiosity discovered what looked like stream beds. In fact, there was running water on Mars, and we discovered rocks that were clearly evidence of running water with materials deposited, just like the stream beds on Earth. What it's now done is go to one of those stream beds, and drill into the rocks and look at the properties, the materials, and those we now discover there are nutrients like potassium and nitrogen, the kind of things that you might hope could be nutrients for early life. Plus, more importantly, it seems to me, is that material is not oxidized. You know, Mars is red because, you know, it's oxidized. But in fact, if oxygen had existed on Earth, free oxygen, life would never have evolved on this planet, because all those organic materials would have been oxidized and lost their energy and never could have produced you and me. So the fact that some of that material is not oxidized in the stream beds means there's potential, there's energy available for life. So there's the energy available for life because it's not oxidized, and there are the nutrients. So the properties are there. We haven't discovered life by any means yet, either extant or extinct, but it means it's a much better bet.
I was going to say, when was... Are we talking billions of years ago when this likely happened?
Well, actually,
Or
the running water
occurred?
was fairly recent, so we don't know. I mean, the answer is we don't know. But it could have been billions of years ago, and I think, as we've talked about, for me, what makes it exciting is that it could have been that the first forms of life in our solar system evolved on Mars and came to Earth by meteorites. And that's so when we want to know what a Martian looks like, look in the mirror.
Well, all right. I don't know how to take that.
Take it in a good way.
Okay, all right, thank you. Before we let you go, now the origins, you're having a stories...
We're having an Origin Stories
event.
weekend.
What's that all about?
We're having 2 events this weekend that I'm really excited about at Gamage Auditorium. The first night on Friday is Science, Myth, and Reality, and we have a test screening of a brand new feature-length film, and we're going to show the film, and the audience can actually give their input, and it's a major new feature film. And then it's about Richard Dawkins and me, and follows us around. But it also has a bunch of Hollywood stars and other people who will comment. And Ian McEwan, a well-known author, is going to be there. Richard Dawkins will be there, and we'll have a panel afterwards, and also a very special guest appearance, but I can't tell you who, on Friday night. And then on Saturday, we have Origin Stories with some of the best science popularizers in the world, with Neil deGrasse Tyson, Brian Greene, Ira Flatow, Bill Nye, Neil Stevenson, a science fiction writer. It's going to be a great night, and I think that may almost be sold out, so you've got to get your tickets soon.
I was going to say, you know, Bill Nye is the science guy.
He is the science guy. That's right. But on this program, I'm the science guy.
That's right. And it was interesting. The science of storytelling and the storytelling of science.
You know, the point is that, well, exactly, because both those things are there. Science is a wonderful series of stories. We try and do it once a month. But there's a way of telling stories. And so we thought if we got the best science storytellers in the world to talk about it, each of them will do a little presentation of their favorite science story, and then we'll talk about how to make science more interesting and how to use the wonderful stories of science to get kids and adults excited about science. So it's going to be a fun night. Both nights are going to be fun because there'll be the movie and the panel the first night and then the second night. And so I think it's great that we can fill up Gamage Auditorium, almost 3,000 seats on science 2 nights in a row. It says a lot for Arizona,
well,
I think.
And it says a lot because people want to know about this.
Exactly.
People watch this. They watch you on YouTube, for goodness sakes, because they want to know about this
In
kind of
fact,
stuff.
people are interested in science, and they're fascinated by it. And if you and I could convince more media to do what we're doing today, I think people want to know what's going on because science is exciting.
Last question. We've got a minute or so left.
Okay.
Here. Did I read that meteorite that supposedly slammed into Yucatan, God knows how long ago, was
65.
actually a comet? Now they're thinking it could be a comet instead of a meteorite?
That could be true. I don't know. It could be. I mean, we are bombarded by comets all the time, and it doesn't matter what it was. It would have created the same type of devastation if it was 10 kilometers across and slammed into the atmosphere. It would produce the same amount of energy, whether it was a rock or a ball of frozen ice.
So it really doesn't make too much difference what it was.
The
was
heat
big.
generated would have been immense.
Well, you got a thing over Russia. You see the thing flying across the...
Yeah, but it never even made it to the ground. In fact, you know, the thing about Russia was interesting it was maybe 10 tons, but 100 tons a day of material fall on Earth every day from space. Most of it is so small you don't notice it, but every day 100 tons of material is falling onto Earth. And in fact, over the history of the Earth, enough water was delivered by comets in the early stages of the Earth to have produced all the oceans, we think. So,
Wow.
yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So
some of them may have produced life, too. That's another neat thing. We've discovered not only amino acids on comets, but, in fact, probably chemical processes. We'll talk about that maybe next time.
let's do that next time. We'll talk about the film as well. Good luck this weekend now with that storytelling thing.
Thanks. It'll be fun. I hope you'll come.
All right. Sounds good. Tuesday on Arizona Horizon, hear the pros and cons of bills that are designed to change some of the state's voting laws, and we'll hear about the closure of a solar power manufacturing plant in Goodyear. That's on the next Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
If you have comments about Arizona Horizon, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Your comments may be used on a future edition of Arizona Horizon. Thank you. Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.